When a series has been around as long as Pokémon has, it's somewhat inevitable that things are going to start to feel a little bit stale eventually. In fact, since its debut back in the late 90s, the series has found many highs and lows. The best mainline Pokémon games managed to rise above the criticism though, with titles like Pokémon Legends Arceus and Pokémon Sun and Moon showing there's still plenty of life left in the franchise yet. And on that note, we've decided to put together a list of the top 10 best Pokémon games of all time, according to Metacritic. But of course, just before we do go into the video, if you do like this type of content and you would like to see some more top 10s, be sure to hit that subscribe button and of course like this video. And with all that said, let's just get straight into it. These are the top 10 best Pokemon games of all time, according to Metacritic. Number 10. Ruby and Sapphire. By the time Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire hit the market, the franchise already had a dedicated fan base around the world. Although many fans had low expectations for the series, Ruby and Sapphire made for exciting changes to the franchise, like adding double battles, and 135 new Pokemon to catch and battle. Hoenn is filled with amazing locations, and while what was in the first games left a lasting impression, these locations were only seen in the anime. While the game's visuals are pretty bad, by modern standards, they were incredibly impressive for their era. The Game Boy Advance ensured that Ruby and Sapphire had far better visuals than any of their predecessors, and a lot of the competition too. Number 9. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. 11 years after the original Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, Nintendo decided it was time for fans to revisit the Hoenn region. While the games are remakes of the original titles, there are a few tweaks, like the addition of the Delta episode, which gave older fans a reason to return. Unlike the original games, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire used a new visual style that was first introduced in Pokemon X and Y, as well as Mega Evolutions. Thanks to this new 3D art style, the Hoenn region explored in Gen 3 remakes is a visual treat for both new and old fans alike. Number 8. Platinum. During the 4th generation of Pokemon games, Game Freak released a follow-up to Pokemon Diamond and Pearl named Pokemon Platinum. In this title, players once again visited the Sinnoh region. Despite some changes and new content though, fans and critique faulted Pokemon Platinum for being too similar to the other titles. Some small changes were made in Platinum, like the addition of the Wi-Fi Plaza, though for those who had already picked up on the other Sinnoh region titles, Platinum is generally considered to be one of the more skippable installments in the series. Number 7. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon were the last games released on the 3DS before the franchise made the jump to the Nintendo Switch. Although the games were built off the foundations laid by the original Sun and Moon, they failed to perform as well when it came to the critics' reviews. The Pokemon franchise is still trying to see what can be done with the spin-off series, but there are some still fascinating entries from the past. While the games are still scored fairly well with critics, they change very little when it comes to both the story and the gameplay. Despite offering players an excuse to revisit Alola, many felt that it was easier to simply replay the original Sun and Moon a second time rather than shell out for one of the sequels. Number 6. Pokémon Legends Arceus. The Pokemon series has come a long way since its humble beginnings on the original Game Boy, more than a quarter of a century ago. Generation to generation, it can sometimes feel though that there is a lack of innovation on display, which isn't helped by the fact that most of the games feature what is effectively the exact same story. It's perhaps for these reasons that Pokemon Legends Arceus was so well received. Though it's far from perfect, and a little more rough around the edges, many believe it to be the most innovative Pokemon game in years. It's difficult to argue too much with that assessment either, with a semi-open world setting, barn-based battles, and Jim Badger's adventures feeling infinitively fresher than any of its recent predecessors. Number 5. Diamond and Pearl. Released on the Nintendo DS as the first generation 4 titles, Pokemon Diamond and Pearl introduced fans to the Sinnoh region, and while these games did very little to change up the Pokemon formula, the addition of the second screen on the DS allowed them to add Poketech, which essentially works as a smart device for the handheld console. Although Diamond and Pearl are more than 15 years old, fans still love them because they took everything from the early Pokemon titles and tweaked them for the better. The games were remade and released in late 2021, but neither reviewed anywhere near as well as the originals. Number 4. HeartGold and SoulSilver. Much like Diamond and Pearl, Pokemon HeartGold and SoulSilver show why the 4th generation of Pokemon games are still loved by fans to this day. Although the games are remakes of 2 second Gen 2 games, HeartGold and SoulSilver are recognized as some of the best mainline Pokemon games of all time. While the remakes gave the older titles some much needed visual enhancements to the Johto region, the best part of them is that they allowed fans to go back and capture some of the most iconic Pokemon that at the time weren't obtainable on any of the newer games. Number 3. Black and White. When asking a fan of the series which Pokemon game is their favourite, there is a good chance that they will say Pokemon Black and White. While the games are not the highest rated according to Metacritic, many other sites like IGN have praised the titles very highly. Although many of the games before Black and White took place in regions based on Japan, Black and White's Unova region was inspired by New York. In switching the focus, the developers were able to change things just enough to visually entice fans, while still ensuring that the game still felt very familiar. That said, they also went back to basics, and within this title, you could only catch Pokemon within the Black and White Pokédex. That is until Black and White 2. Number 2. Sun and Moon. Up until the release of Sun and Moon, the franchise had revolved around players beating several gym leaders and then taking on the Elite Four. However, with Sun and Moon taking place in a more relaxed setting, the Alola region, which is based on Hawaii, Game Freak chose to implement a new Island Challenge Trail system instead. While most of the core mechanics remained unchanged, these trials have players do different things before facing off against a large Pokemon called a Totem Pokemon. In addition to the new trials and the new system, Sun and Moon also incorporated the Z moves, Pokefinder, and Pokemon Refresh, as well as X and Y's Mega Evolutions. Number 1. Pokemon X and Y. Although Pokemon has been around for decades now, Pokemon X and Y are still proof that the franchise can still out incredible titles. Up until the release of Pokemon X and Y, the series has stuck with the 2D top-down art style, making the game's new 3D visual look incredibly spectacular for its time, and still even holding up today. Despite the core game in X and Y being the same as every other game in the series before them, the addition of Mega Evolutions changed battles just enough to keep the game feeling fresh. Additionally, the game also introduced players to 72 new Pokemon, as well as a new Fairy type. And so there you pretty much have it. Those were the top 10 best Pokemon games to have ever been released of all time according to Metacritic. So what did you think of this list? Do you agree with this top 10? Or perhaps that you think that there was a game not on this list that should have been included? If so, do let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. I would love to hear them. And of course, not forgetting that if you do like this type of content and you would like to see some more top 10s, be sure to hit that subscribe button and of course, like this video. I will also leave some more Pokemon related content at the end of this video if you would like to check them out. Thanks very much for watching guys, and I will see you all next time.